I've been interested in bees, honeybees, since I was in primary school, and I eventually did my PhD, finished it in 1976 on wood ants. And I chose the title of tonight's talk. You can take it that I'm aware that the Burren happens to be located in Ireland, but a lot of my observations on ants, while might be relevant to the Burren, haven't been made in the Burren. So that's the way for picking and choosing the title of the talk. One thing you can do is if you go to tinyurl.com backslash, it doesn't matter whether it is backslash or a forward slash Breen talk, you should be able to find the readings and the lecture for tonight in a PDF form. So basically the first item that should come up is the lecture. You might or might not want the readings that go with it. And I mentioned some of them as we pass by, as we go through. Okay. The only thing I do ask you is to respect the copyright of the images. All except one of the images in the talk are my own. So basically a short introduction to Irish ants and their biology and getting to know some of them. Some info on ants in the Burren. And I'll start by saying that the ants are related to wasps and bees, and they're in the order Hymenoptera. And one of the things about the Hymenoptera is that the thorax is broadly joined to the abdomen. So we know in insects that they have a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. What I'm saying is, and we all be thinking that bees have waists and wasps and ants have waists, but the thorax is broadly joined to the abdomen. And one group, the sawflies, don't have a waist, but all the others have a waist. But that waist is actually located within the abdomen. So this is a sawfly, the great pine sawfly or great pine horntail. And if we look here, she doesn't have a waist. And now if we start looking at a diagram of ants, we see the head. This is what we would probably think of as the thorax. But I'm now telling you that this back part here is actually the first segment of the thorax, of the abdomen. This is the second segment of the abdomen and the third. So this type of ant, in fact, has three waists. Strictly speaking, this is called the gaster. And if one was reading ant papers, they would be referring to the gaster. But I usually sort of say, once you understand what I'm talking about, you can then go back to calling this the thorax and this the abdomen. But strictly speaking, you're wrong, or I'm wrong. So insects have a head, thorax, abdomen. And then this is I've just been saying about the thorax and the gaster. I visited this museum in The Hague 2 years ago, and I had collected posters by Escher when I was a student once upon a time. I didn't realize he had produced one on ants. And I can tell you that all the details, there are 5 parts of the tarsus here. There are 12 segments on the antennae. All the details are correct. And so this is a formicine ant. I'll be telling you what they are in a moment, because she has just 2 waists and this part here called the petiole. So this is a formicine ant, and the formicine ants are either formicas or lasius in Ireland. And she just has 1 petiole with a waist here and a waist here. And the myrmecine ants, which are the red ants, and I'll show you pictures in a moment, have a petiole and a post petiole. Now, we come from, if you're aware of things like bees and wasps, there are we talk about solitary bees and solitary wasps, but the ants are all social species. That means they have workers and they live in colonies. They have perennial nests. So that means that the nests live from year to year. And this is a difference from many of the bees. They can have one or more queens. And then we say they're either monogynous or polygynous. And then to make things complicated, they can have multiple nests per colony. And then we say that that colony is polydomous. I'm not going to get into it really, but some people have speculated that for one species of Lasius that occurs in the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, they say that there might just be one, strictly speaking, might be one colony, entire, all interrelated up and down with on the Iberian Peninsula. And there are some large, huge colonies of wood ants, which I'll mention briefly eventually, in the Swiss Alps. When they're young, before they fly to mate, the young queens and males have wings. So when we see flying ants, we're seeing queens and males. The workers never have and don't have wings. They fly from the nest on mating flights. They mate, and the queen's found a new nest. That's basically the life cycle. And then if we want to try to get to know some common ants, I say that you start by getting to know the colours. And these colours are not what normal people would refer to as in English. They are what I call myrmecology. That's the study of ants. They're myrmecology speak. So they're a sort of a specialist. So if I say red, and I'll show you what I mean by red in a moment, I think most people would say mahogany brown. If I say yellow, I think most people would say a pale brown. Now, this one is definite. They probably, if you have ants in your garden, the most likely species in Ireland is either Lasius niger or Platythorax. One way or the other, it's called the black garden ant. And I'm now going to try to tell you that it's not black, it's dark chocolate brown. And then the other species are black, properly black. So you're going to have to go know those colors without having to think, is that black or is that dark chocolate brown? And then we have two major groups, the myrmecines, I've been referring to them already, which are the red ants mainly, and the formicines. The red ants can sting. They've got the petiole and post-petiole. And if you look at the nest, when you lift a stone, they have naked pupae. The formicines, which will be formicas and lasiuses, they'll be black, yellow, dark chocolate brown. They only have a petiole. They have more or less lost their sting, so they don't sting, but they squirt formic acid. And I'll come back to that in a moment when we talk about wood ants. And if you look at them under a stone, they have covered pupae. And I'll show you pictures of what I mean by all of this in a moment. Formica are black, lasius are yellow or dark chocolate brown. Okay, this is a scanning electron microscope picture, low resolution, low power, but just to show you. So what I'm waving at here on the mouse is the back of the thorax, and this is showing you the petiole, the post-petiole, and the abdomen is down here to the left-hand side of the screen. And Myrmic has these two spines at the back. We say epinodal spines, if I want to be proper, but it's on the back of the thorax. Now, they are not quite what you might have referred to as being red, but that is red in in the colors that people like me talk about. So this is a red ant. This one is carrying a larva. This one is carrying eggs. And I told you that it was sort of mahogany brown in color. Anyway, that's a myrmecine, and we can look here and you can see that it has the petiole and postpetiole, and I can see the spines. So in fact, I'm telling you that I can see enough on this picture to identify the species. This part of the antenna is curved and these spines are short, but I'm telling you what I know. And that's it closed in. There's a curved antenna part here, and this is relatively short because the other species has much longer spines. And then this is a different nest, so it's a different species, but it's also a myrmica. And notice that they have naked pupae. The pupae are not covered. These are larvae. That's another pupae out of focus over here. And there are a few pupae up here. The pupae have the beginnings of, you can see their legs and antennae, and you can see the eye, I hope. So then we move to the formicines, and this one is a formica. And again, the head is over here to the right-hand side. This is the thorax. This is the petiole here. And this is the abdomen. And this is a formica worker. This is of the hairy wood ant. And here's her head. There's her thorax. There's her petiole. And there's her gaster or abdomen. And back to tell you now that you now know that Escher's picture is of a formicine ant, probably a formica wood ant worker. And the life cycle is that most Irish ants, I like sort of say that they fly at 5 o'clock on the 20th of July. And people try to correct me sometimes. They say, no, you were wrong. It was the 21st. But it's around then is when you expect. And it's usually around 5 o'clock when most of the species fly. Now, there are exceptions, and including those wood ants, that the wood ants, for example, fly at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. But you can watch gulls and starlings and swallows all feasting on them because I'll show you some pictures in a moment, but the queens are very fatty and a lot of nutrient, and a lot of them get eaten by birds. So when I say in Limerick, I mean here in my own garden, in the suburbs in the almost within Limerick City. We are within Limerick City. And so these are the swarming, and there's a queen, a male, and a worker. So in this case, it's not always so, but in this case, the male is much smaller than the queen. And then the worker doesn't ever have wings. And you'll see that the males and the queens have much larger thoraxes, because once the queen mates, she cuts off her own wings, and but you can still see the much bigger thorax relative to the workers. And that's another example of the black queen garden ant. But you're supposed to notice as well, I hope you can see that they're dark chocolate. I sometimes say Bourneville chocolate brown rather than black. Look here again. And this one is black. So this one is Formica. And I've it in to show you, you can see the petiole. This is my fingers holding it. And I've done this so numerous times. I can take photographs this way and they can walk away unhurt. So you just hold them by the legs temporarily while I'm taking the photograph, but you can see the large thorax. So this one has mated probably a few hours ago, and she has now cut off her wings and she's looking around for a place to build a nest. And these are swarming yellow meadow ants. at Borragone, if anybody has heard about it. And I'll be selling this to you tonight as being almost the Burren. It's an example of limestone situation in Limerick. And it's our little bit of the Burren. So a lot of my observations have been made there. So this is the queen, young flying queens. There's the smaller ones here are the males. And if one looks around the picture, there are a few workers, but it's mostly males and queens. And that's the swarming. I thought I'd introduce a little bit as to how you study ants. If you want to start identifying them, you probably are looking at having a by 20 hand lens. I would have a by 10 for bumblebees and bees, and I would have a by 20 for ants. Um, a lot of it is just turning over stones and having a look. And could I ask you, please, if you do that, turn the stone back again if there's a nest under it, especially. I'll show you what type of pooter I use. It's different to what most people learn as being pooters. I've recently been doing some pitfall trapping about a year ago. And I'll show you what I was using. I was using 25 mil tubes. And then this is something you might like to try, which is to use baits and put out a line of, take two little pieces of stick to mark where you're putting them. Um, Put out a line of Madeira buns or cakes in a line. And by the time, if you're putting out about 10 lots of little patches of crumbs, by the time you get to the end, if there are ants present, you can go back to the first one and there will probably be ants present. This is the pooter I used. I spent a year in Norway in 1976, and this is the Scandinavian style pooter. This is rubber tubing, so it's silicone rubber tubing that I use, but you can use the orangey tubing if you want to. This is a piece of perspex. I give the measurements up there. And this, in my case, I use plankton net material. But you can use a piece of curtain material. I've also used that in the past. So you jam the perspex into the tube and the idea is that you put your mouth here and suck. And if it's one of the species that produces formic acid, you will taste the formic acid at the back of your mouth and you will notice it. Other than that, you hoover them up into there and then you learn how to put them into or transfer them into small tubes of industrial methylated spirits for collection. And then you can put them on cards when you come home, or you can study them under a microscope. So this was using the pitfall traps. So it was using 25 mil tubes and covering them and emptying them. I left these in place. It was in Killarney National Park 2 years ago. I left them in place for about 3 weeks. I visited them once a week and emptied them. And it was amazing the number of individuals and species that one got. The usual preservative that most semi-professionals use is antifreeze. Back to the Borragone site near Askeaton, and these are the nests, the mound nests of the yellow meadow ants. And this was one study that we did, that I was involved with in the around 2000, with a man called Thomas Murray. And this is a 20 by 20 square meter quadrat. And within it, we laid out 1 meter square quadrats, subquadrats. So that means that we had 400 subquadrats. And using bun, Madeira cake, there were ants in 396 of the 400 subquadrats. There were 10 species. We don't have to go into them in detail now, but to get 5 species of Myrmica in a 20 by 20 quadrat in Ireland is fairly exceptional, but you should be able to find parts of the Burren where you'd find exactly the same list of species. So that means that about half of the Irish list of ants And some of these, Schenke, Myrmica Schenke, Lasius mixtus over here are quite rare species in Ireland. Um, we're all within 20 square meters. Well, 400 square meters, but 20 by 20 quadrat. And that's it visually. So you can begin to imagine the distributions of different colonies of the different species. Now, if you lift up a stone and see this type of thing, you'll see the galleries that are produced. And the yellow ants and ants in general are referred to as ecosystem engineers because they are modifying the environment. And maybe I should have gone back for a moment. And if we looked at that picture 4 or 5 pictures back, that one, if I'm speaking to the farming community, I like to use old units that the farmers will understand. And if I say that we know the average distance between nests, if we know that there are about 10,000 workers within each nest, if we know that each worker weighs about 2 milligrams, and if we take our calculator and start calculating, I'm telling you that within that area as that we're looking at in the picture, it represents approximately a half a bullock to the acre. And that's just one of the 10 species that um, occurs in that site. Maybe I should tell you that this photograph is taken in March before the vegetation grows. And then this one is taken in August, which is, so it's not that easy to see the same distribution, but there were 49 nests of the yellow meadow ant in that 20 by 20 quadrat. And so if we're also looking in, now I don't think I've mentioned it before, this is the color that I'm calling yellow. So these are the yellow meadow ant, and these ones are mostly either eggs or young larvae. Maternity ward here. And slightly later, these are the larger larvae, again, the yellow meadow ant. And then this is what I mean by covered pupae. The pupae have a cover on them. And the larger ones, in fact, if you look carefully, there are 3 sizes of pupae here, and the largest will be young queens, and the smallest over here will be workers, and in between are probably males. Again, 2 sizes of uh, covered pupae. And both of these Lasius species are monogynous. I used that word earlier on. That means there's only one queen in the nest. And only once, I have never seen the colony queen of Lasius flavus, the yellow meadow ant. I've only once in my life seen, and I got 2 grab photographs on Clare Island of the black garden ant. This is the one that's dark chocolate brown. And here she was, and she quickly moved away. But you can see she's in laying mode. Her abdomen or her gaster is greatly enlarged. If you look carefully, if you download it, you should be able to zoom in a little bit, and you can actually see the eggs within her ovaries inside. And these are fresh eggs, and these are the nurses minding them. This is eggs down here again. So then let's talk about some other things. So myrmecophiles are organisms. I'm mainly talking about other arthropods, which live in a relationship with ants. We're in this house in 1993. In 2021, so you can take it that I'm a person who does turn over stones. I had seen one of these in about 10 years previously, but I hadn't seen it. But suddenly they're here, and suddenly they're now quite common in the nest of the black garden ant. It is a woodlouse that has a huge scientific name, Platyarthurus hoffmannseggi, but it's referred to as the ant woodlouse. It's small, it's white, it's blind, and it only lives in ants' nests, but not just. I've seen it with myrmicas and other species of ants as well. And that's what it looks like. They're fully adult. There's an ant walking over some of them for scale. So if you've got those in your garden, they're interesting to note and should be recorded. And this is an interesting hoverfly that occurs in the Burren. And there have been some papers published because I was involved with some of the people from England who were doing research on this hoverfly some years back. And there are some papers on the species in the Burren. So it occurs with the black formica in the Burren. And it's not common outside of Ireland, but for example, I saw it in Tipperary many years ago. Basically, the larvae, we'll show you what they look like in a moment because they're quite distinctive. They eat ant larvae, but they produce drops of sweet stuff and the ants fall for it. So it's a drop of sweet liquid. And interestingly, the story is somewhat very similar. And one of the people involved, the two people involved in that in the project on Microdon, had come to it because they were the people, Jeremy Thomas and Graham Ellams in England, who had brought the large blue butterfly back to England, and it's now doing quite well. And they wanted to look at the biology of a similar organism. And the similar organism was Microdon. So it's similar to the story of the blue butterflies, where the caterpillars go into the nests of the ants. And this is what the adult looks like. And they fly around the first week of June for a couple of weeks. And they have a very distinctive whine. And if you know if you find Formica lemani nests, you will find these in the Burren. And that's what the larvae look like. And in the mid-19th century, so around 1840, when they were first described, they were described as a mollusk, as a slug. And then the slugs started producing flies. So they knew they don't look like any sort of normal insect larva that you've seen. And you see, so there are many places in the Burren where these are there. If you do find them, please do turn the stone back on them and don't destroy them. And that's what the pupae look like. So they should be just about coming to start pupating probably within the next week or two. And you can see these are the black formica ants. And they emerge by, I'm trying to think which end. I think to this end, they cut like this in front, and it opens up like a door, and out comes the adult. And this is just a bit of speculation, but I did mention that Jeremy Thomas was one of the people present, and he's one of the British experts on butterflies, as the author of a number of books. And he showed me how to find the eggs of the brown hairstreak butterfly. I have to admit that I still haven't seen the adults, but I do know how to find the eggs on the blackthorn in spring. And he maintains that they should have, or may have, or probably have an association with ants, and we'd expect them with myrmicas. So if you see myrmica nests with caterpillars in it, you probably should mark them and remember where you've been. And then to show you an interesting parasite of ants, and I'm happy to boast that I've got a copy of this book. It's 1747. It's the first book on ants in English. And they mentioned, amongst other incidents, that tend to lessen and destroy ant flies. Now, ant flies are what they're calling queens and males, the flying ones. This man. It's observable that some of them are demolished by a white and long kind of worm. You may frequently see three or four insides, but seldom more than one from the small ant fly. The small ant fly is the male. So these are on Clare Island, where this was or is still quite findable on Clare Island, and we have seen it once in the eastern side of the Burren near Gort. And the idea is that you're seeing within the nest, you're seeing queens that have normal wings, but you're seeing queens that have greatly reduced wings. And not in this photograph, but you can see males with reduced wings as well. So this is a male, this is a queen with the reduced wings, and this is a worker, and there's a queen with normal wings. And if we look at them in the field, these are the queens. I see some males as well, but they're not parasitized. So these queens have a parasitic nematode worm in their gaster. And they're obviously, that's it, they're never going to fly. And if you put them into a petri dish with some water and dampness, these nematodes will come out. And there can be 4 or 5 of them in the queens. So there's 2 queens here, and these all came out of their 2 guts, their 2 abdomens. Now, amongst the readings that I've given you, there's a paper on these by Audrey O'Grady, who investigated them a bit more. And I'm giving you, we're not going to go through this, but I'm just telling you that there are some extra readings if you want to read them. But basically, I want to come to another word, big word, called myrmecochory. And in Ireland, the nicest example is by the pavement ant. It's an ant called Tetramorium caespitum, and it occurs mainly in County Wexford. Anyway, to come back for a moment, that basically I'll be making the point, and if you read some of the papers, for example, in the readings, I'll be showing you that within the nest, I'm making the case that the ants collect seeds and it distributes seeds, and that the seeds within the different species of ants, and this was done in the Burren, are there are different banks of seeds in different species of ants' nests. And I sometimes show this sort of slide, and this is an ant's nest. You can see that there's things like heather and things growing around it, kaluna, but growing on the nest itself is wild thyme. So I describe this as being, this is a nest of the meadow, of the yellow meadow ant, and I describe this as being an ant's nest in flower. And basically, again, this was done at the Borragone site where I showed you earlier on near Askeaton. This was 12 nests comparing whether plants were north, south, east, or west with small quadrats versus off the nest. And there's the wild thyme is one of the species, Festuca ovina, ovina rubra, the fescue grasses. And these species are mostly associated with the nests and not off the nests. In fact, in the Askeaton area, one species that you can get a photograph in springtime is of cowslips in flower. The cowslips are never on the nest, they're always off the nest. It's little things like that. Basically, what I'm saying is that the ants are modifying the chemistry, and then the plants are growing where they're most suited to. And then back to Myrmecory, and I like to joke that this has that studying ants is biblical because there's a quotation from the Bible: "Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. She stores harvest." And this is the only slide I'm showing you tonight that is not taken within Ireland. And this is my internet connection is unstable. Are you okay with me, Pranjali?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
The harvester ants. So if you're holidaying anywhere near the Mediterranean, you will see ants. And interestingly, I'll make one other point, is that there are big ones and lesser ones and medium-sized ones. And these are referred to as maxims and minims. And they have distinct sizes, but they collect seeds and pieces of vegetation. And these are the harvester ants. But in Ireland, we have one species, the pavement ant. It occurs at the Ballytake Burrows in County Wexford, and it gathers seeds. So I'm talking about this is the Ballytake Burrow, and these are the salty islands out there. So you get the idea where it is, a very long sand dune area. And this is within the dunes, and there are lots of stones, and most of these stones are inhabited by pavement ants. And if we look underneath, we can see that they've got naked pupae. So they're myrmecine ants, they're blackish in color, they're small. And these are with the sexuals. The smaller ones are worker larvae, worker pupae and larvae. And they gather these seeds. And these have been identified as Euphrasia, which is eyebright, wild thyme, and Cerastium. I'd have to start thinking of the English name for that. So these are the seeds that they're collecting. And in dry areas, that provides them with both lipid food, fatty food, and it also provides them with water, etc. So it's a desert or a dry habitat condition. And we don't have many of that types of habitat in Ireland. And this is probably the best example showing Myrmecory. And then, since I told you that I did my PhD once upon a time on Formica lugubris, on the hairy wood ant, I can't not say a few things about it. So basically, they're very large nests, and this is back to the book again for the moment. I found this interesting when I went to Norway, that I had grown up knowing the word pismire. And the word pismire in Ireland means any ant. In Dublin, apparently, it can mean an insult. And the other ant that they talk about is Emmet. We'll all have heard of Robert Emmet. But when I went to Norway, I discovered that they were called Pismaur. You have to guess what the first part of it is. I'm just saying the word piss. And Meyer meaning Maur is ant. So pissing ant. And I told you earlier on that they squirt formic acid. And wood ants do squirt formic acid. And I've had it in my eye a few times. And when you get a squirt of formic acid in your eye, you sit down for about 15 minutes while your eye comes back. So they're also called pismires and vulgarly emmets. Pismire is a Danish word. So it's a Norwegian word as well, pismar. And in Ireland, they're in Woodford and Galway. They're in Kilcorn woods near Kilcorn Lodge Hotel in Tipperary. And there are a few nests, and I mean, we know about 2 to 5 nests in Killarney National Park, and they're now not known anywhere else. So that's basically their Irish distribution. But they are healthy enough in the Tipperary woodlands, and they're healthy enough in the Woodford area of County Galway. They have trails that can be up to 75 meters from the nest, and they bring back prey. And then they fly, I told you already, at 8:30 in the morning, 8 to 10 in the morning. So a queen and a male, flying queen. And then there's a freshly mated queen. She has now cut off her wings, and you can see the stubs of the wings here. So that's how you know she's a queen. I'm not going to go into this. These are the aphids, but all of the ants, including the meadow ants and things, they would have root aphids. Aphids are effectively green fly, but they're not always green, and they collect honeydew. And honeydew is the feces or aphid poo. And so these are ants with aphids in Tipperary. And you can see them literally at the anus of the aphids collecting the drop of honeydew. A drop of honeydew. A drop of honeydew. And this is how the aphids benefit. They are being cared for by these workers, and it would be a brave any other predator that would attack them with that many protectors around. So it's a protection racket. And these are on a very rare aphid in Killarney National Park. I now currently don't know any place where it occurs anymore since the fires. But it occurs on Oak in Killarney National Park. It's a very large aphid. And if you need to read a bit more about these, there's a species dossier, but I've put it into the folder and you can download it and read it. And then I'm finishing with just a few slides of a very uncommon ant. It's called the jet ant because it's jet black in color. Think patent leather shoes, that sort of shiny black. The workers look all the same size. They walk, they don't dash around, they walk in tracks, and they have heart-shaped head. I know I've been making this appeal as I give talks on ants, and different people have found them for me. So I haven't found any of these 5 colonies, but I now know where they are. And I would previously have known about, I think, about 6 or 7 colonies since the early 1970s. So there's a reading if you want to read a bit more about them. And so they're jet black, shining, and they have heart-shaped heads. Basically, they don't form their nests the way the other ones do. They have to go into one yellow species of ant, and that yellow species has to be already a cuckoo of the common yellow ant. So it's a cuckoo of a cuckoo, and that's probably why it's so uncommon. Very finally, that website, British Wasps and Ants Recording Society, has a huge amount of information. If anything, it might have a lot too much for beginners. But if you know where you're going and if you know what individual species you're looking for, they will have the information there, bewars.com. And hopefully that will get you going on this important group of insects. And that's my introduction.
Thank
Okay,
you, John.
Pranjali?
Thanks very much. If anyone has any questions for John, you might like to put the questions in the chat button or the Q&A button. We still have a few minutes before we can let John go. So, feel free to put questions to him. John, I might start off. What would you say is the most important role of ants in our ecosystem?
I think I would answer and say that they're referred to as keystone species, meaning that they're absolutely vitally important from the point of view of they can be top predators. With the number of you, if you just look at the numbers of those nests in when it's a healthy ant population, um, they are probably like when you multiply them out and see the biomass of them, they're up there.
Yeah, yeah.
They're up there with the vertebrates.
And are they, I presume they're obviously in the Burren, there'd be, the meadow ants would be indicator of a healthy meadow or a biodiverse meadow.
Yes, yeah.
And is it because,
Anywhere you see them. So I've been campaigning just to anybody that I feel can make decisions that where you see a field of yellow meadow ants or where you see the mound nests, it means that site hasn't been disturbed and it hasn't been fertilized probably for 20 or 30 years. I'm happy to say that I now have 4 mounds here in a garden in Limerick.
oh, very good. Because doesn't it take
Yeah.
really long to establish? Is there do you have any time scales of
You
how
see,
long
it
it
means
takes?
that if you fertilize them, the grasses grow and
Yeah,
suddenly that shades the nests.
yeah,
And so they do need, they can survive quite well with grazing by things like rabbits and things. Even the place Barragone is being grazed by small cattle at a known density.
and
And that's the way they're being managed.
does it indicate how long it has been, or how long it has taken for the ant to, like, from the, can you actually gauge, can you actually measure the nest and say how long it has
Eh,
taken to get there?
People have tried to, but I'm not necessarily sure that you can. I
Yeah,
think they can have spurts of rapid growth.
okay.
And yeah,
And can you tell us a little bit more about relationship with the different plants? I know you mentioned the cowslips like to grow on the side of
somebody has
the.
seized up now, Pranjali.
Oh, sorry. Um, can you
You
hear me
seized
now?
up there for a moment.
Okay, okay.
You
Can you hear
started
me
by
now?
saying, can you tell us a little bit about
Oh yeah, so the different plants that we might recognize in the Burren and their relationship with say an anthill. I know you mentioned that the cowslip might grow on the side
well,
of.
the real one, and you can see it at the side of the. I drive sometimes up into Connemara, and you can suddenly see patches of wild
Yeah,
thymus praecox. That is the ultimate one.
yes, yeah,
That is nearly always on ants' nests,
yeah. And can you
and
explain
nearly
what
always on yellow ants' nests.
and why is that?
I just presumed that, well, for a start, do you remember this shot where I lifted the rock and you saw all the galleries? All of those grains of soil have been brought up from below by the ants.
Yeah,
That means that they're selected for size, so the nests feel spongy because the nests, all of those pieces of soil, have been size selected because they're fitted the size of the mandibles as they carry it up.
yeah.
So
And
it's totally selected.
and is that
And but
particularly suited to thyme?
the soil chemistry, and I put the paper into the readings.
Yeah,
There are distinct higher levels of potassium and things in the ants' nests, as distinct from the non-nest material, even a meter away.
and that's particularly suitable to thyme, is it?
It seems to be pretty that the thymus seems to be the one, and those grasses, the fescue grasses as well, are nearly always there. Yeah, they have moved in, and they have moved in my garden.
Very good. Very good. So we have a question here from Maria Long. Wow, that was really great, John. Can you take a stab at what are the biggest threats to ants in Ireland?
I suppose you have to use this word that everybody uses, intensification. Um, Basically, I did say that when you're seeing these species healthy, it has meant no artificial fertilizer. It has meant no ploughing. It has meant no um, insecticides for a long period of time. And by that I mean 80 or 100 years.
But I imagine it still needs some kind of grazing for ants,
Oh, yeah.
hills to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another
And
question
as
by
I say,
her.
the Borragone is being managed by light breeds of cattle I've offhand, I don't know the density, but there's a recognized, you probably know it. Or, but
Okay. Maria's
somebody,
asking another question. Are you aware of the formula that some use whereby they measure height and width, thereby volume of anthills and perhaps also number, with a view of assessing age of a grassland or time since disturbance?
I'm aware of it, but as I say, I'm not hugely
Yeah.
not usually believing it.
Okay.
That is, yeah, that's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Barry
But
McKenna.
I am accepting that the bigger nests and the abundant nests mean a very valuable site. And
Yes.
I maintain that they should, even though it's a common, even though it would be considered a relatively common species in Ireland, I don't know any site better than the photograph I showed you for Borragone in County Limerick, not even in all of the Burren in County Clare.
Okay. Very good.
Partly because the Burren in County Clare, I certainly am aware of large fields of nests like that.
Okay. Maybe there's somebody who's listening who might
I'm
counter.
aware of a few sites, and in my lifetime, the one field that I can always remember was in Glendalough.
Okay.
And when I went back there, it had become a car park. Yeah.
Um, Barry McKenna is asking, could it be possible that time is returning something of benefit to the ants as an exudate?
Well, the ants are almost certainly collecting the seeds,
Okay.
would be one thing.
Are they feeding on them?
Uh, Almost certainly some bit. But,
Okay.
well, certainly the species down in Wexford are.
Okay.
Um, yeah. It would take, you see, it's not that easy to show um, what they're actually eating, but you can show that they're being distributed by the ants.
Okay. Yeah. And do they also have connection with orchid seed? Has it?
No.
No, not that is nothing known about that.
If there are people present who are listening to gardening or into gardening, um, the two lovely examples and are if you have seeds on snowdrops and if you have seeds on cyclamens in your garden. And I mean not the sort of common gaudy garden cyclamen. I mean things like cyclamen hedrifolium. I have seen my aunts in the garden competing with me to get the seeds.
Okay.
They've been collecting them and taking them away. And I've one rare snowdrop that I was watching to get the seeds of. Suddenly I came along and the seeds had suddenly become ripe, and the ants were. I have photographs of it, and those seeds do have this eliosome, which is the fat body, which ants find attractive. And if you grow these cyclamens, you'll find them growing in weird places, and it means that they're heavy seeds, so they don't blow around. It means that ants are walking around with these seeds.
Interesting. Maria's asking another question. Are ants part of the story of the rapid spread of
Say
three
hello to
corn?
Maria. I think she's the Maria that I know
Yes.
or have known in the past.
Yes. Hi, Maria. So she's asking, are ants part of the story of the rapid spread of three-cornered leek, Allium triquitrum?
I haven't heard that story, but yeah, yeah, I could see the possibilities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very good. Um, Anyone else? Any other questions? John, what I know, I'm sure you've been asked this again and again. Why did you study ants?
Well, I told you at the start that I had been interested in social insects
Yeah,
from the early age.
yeah,
And a project came up when I was graduating on wood ants, because at that stage in the early 70s, people were getting worried as to um, they hadn't been seen in certain places for many decades.
yeah.
And yeah, I took them on.
Very good. And
And it's now 50 years later, I'm still doing little bits on the wood ants.
Amy has one last question. Amy has asked, what is your favorite ant? Probably the wood ant, is it?
Yeah, it probably has to be if I've studied it all my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that jet ant as well. It's a weird little one. Yeah. Um, I've been traveling a bit. I would, you just have to be amazed at things like leafcutter ants
Yes.
in in Costa Rica, in my case.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Is there any aspect of their ecology of life cycle that really you find fascinating, any particular aspect compared to
Well, I
other
think
species?
I think the real interesting one is the interaction with aphids, the interaction with the myrmecophiles.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like there are amazing interactions with myrmecophiles. I've only told one or two examples tonight. There
Yeah.
are some amazing beetle ant interactions in the wood ants,
Yeah.
and we don't have them all in Ireland, but I would have seen them in Scandinavia. In Scandinavia and in Britain, northern Britain anyway, they have there's a little tiny ant that lives only in wood ants' nests.
Yeah.
If you're asking favorite ants, there was another little Leptothorax species in Norway, and it lived in acorns, the entire colony. So
In
you find
acorns.
okay,
Wow.
you find an oak acorn, and all you do is you find the oak tree, go under the oak tree, look for the acorns that have a little tiny hole, and you found a colony of Leptothorax. Now, we don't have that species of Leptothorax here, so
Yeah.
if the question referred to Ireland, it doesn't come in as being an interesting one.
Great. It's certainly a species that a lot of people know very little about, isn't it? It's
But
just,
if I'm telling you that there's an entire colony within an acorn,
yeah, that's amazing. That is amazing. Great. I think it's 9 o'clock, so we have reached our time. And thank you for your questions, and most of all, thank you, John, for joining us this evening. That was really, really educational, and a great insight into something we very often don't think about. So we'll keep a better eye as we're walking the fields in the Burren now, and
just
look out
remember
for the ants.
just remember the colors:
Yes,
red, yellow, black, and dark chocolate brown.
and hope not to get them wrong. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, John, and have a good night. Yeah.
okay.